Good morning, my name is Jackie and this is my reflective response to the Alpha Crucis unit, Christian Worldview. This semester my husband Rod and I have had a lot going on. Now, I tend to find that when God is teaching me something new or big or leading me in a new direction, I just get a bit slammed from every direction, and generally negatively but sometimes positively. And it feels like God is flooding me with new ideas and thoughts, and I do actually feel somewhat overwhelmed. Of one thing I'm absolutely certain though, He has a plan for us, and I'm not going to be the same person in the future as I am today. Nor do I want to be. I simply want to know Him better. So between my hideous work situation this semester, ongoing illness, Rod's father passing away, while we were stuck here in Australia, and then his fur baby passing away while we were in New Zealand to bury his dad, amongst many other things. This semester has been absolutely massive. It's been one of the biggest seasons in my life, I think, to have to deal with everything that's been going on. So the study on top has been a challenge, but enjoyable. God never forsakes us, and this has not been any different this semester. And the learning has actually helped keep me centered on the Lord and kept me excited in my thinking of Him and my relationship with Him. So actually to the point that I think my responses to my work situation have been different to what they may have been in the past. I like to think that I've been somewhat more compassionate towards my colleagues in the face of the great injustice that they've done and the depth of their ill will towards me. I don't hate them or anything like that. So I think like that's a God move in my heart. I also have been just sitting with the concept of our humanity, and in light of Jesus' humanity as God created us to be, that the thought of being more human. So I'm actually now considering everyone and myself in that light, with that vein of thought. And going back to my work colleagues, I sort of feel that not only are they far from the Lord, which is obvious, but that also means that they're far from whom He created them to be as humans. I find that really sad. I've also found that understanding that God exists differently to us helps me to be content, to wait for Him to vindicate me and exonerate me, and to just be at peace in that whole situation. I also really love the concept of middle creatures. This helps me understand how I really love animals, and how I can just have that depth of feeling towards creation. I love trees and forest and waterfalls and crisp morning air, and there's so much about the beauty of our creation to love and appreciate. And then at the same time, there's this deep yearning in our hearts to know God better with our spirit. So that concept of middle creatures, of being kind of both, spirit being and a created being, I really like that concept. I hadn't thought of it before in that way. God does all things in His time, and when we don't run ahead, we receive lasting peace and healing. So while we're in New Zealand, God spoke to me with the prophetic word. I was blessed to be in a series of revival meetings, and God singled me out, and it was amazing and very special. And He released some bitterness and fear, massive fear. He released for its hold from me, and He also released in me forgiveness, some things a person I'd been trying to forgive, honestly. and thought that I had, but God just did a work and then it's done. So, I woke up this morning, I'm still here. So that means that God's got work for me to do. He's got things to teach me. I'm nowhere close to even knowing him, and I want to know him more. So, yeah, there's a lot of future. On beginning this subject, I learned that the term worldview is simply how an individual understands reality. Grant's provocative statement really challenged me when he said, "Learn to understand the question in order to move forward, and then ask more questions." So I've been raised to listen, learn what you're told, and don't ask questions. So living in the question, trying to wrap my head around the question and then ask more questions is a big thing for me. The fact that God exists in a different way to us is not news, but at the same time was a challenging topic when faced with the topic of Christology. Millard, Erickson, quoted in my bibliography, said, "Our humanity is not the standard by which we are to measure his. Our humanity is the standard by which we are to be measured." Sorry about the paperwork. This concept is sitting with me still. Previously, I always thought of myself and the situation in front of me and my thoughts and my emotions, and then turned my thoughts to Jesus, and really instinctively I would have thought, he got faced with much worse, and he died and crucified and it was horrific, and but of course he was God. So I think that somehow I had this kind of concept that Jesus was human, sure, he looked like us, he moved like us, but in a Superman kind of a way. He really kind of wasn't. He had this extra special help because he was God. So wrapping my head around the fact that he is fully God and is fully human at the same time is still something I'm grappling with. It is liberating. It challenges me to accept my humanity in the state that I'm in, knowing that there's improvement to be done. And also knowing that I'm never going to be the human that I was created to be whilst I'm on this planet. I'm never going to get there because I can't. But the example of Jesus and what it means to be who we were created to be that person, to be that human. Yeah, that's I'm still chewing that one. Where am I up to? Sorry. I did resolve that it involves being less religion and just accepting myself more. The fact that I'm created means that I have purpose. I am not an accident. And I am grateful for my existence. And I acknowledge that I exist because God chose to create me. He put me inside this body. So a quote from Barth, also in the bibliography, why did he create us? Because he's a creator and because he is love. We creatures received our being by his will and by his spoken word, his action. That's a shortening of what I was reading. We are invited when considering our humanity to earnestly seek God. And in fact, God meets us in that place and leads us on the journey to know him closer. That's from reading Calvin, also in the bibliography. We learned that as we conform to Christ, we conform to the image of God, and we also become more fully human as we were originally created to be. I'm confident that we will never understand God, and indeed to do so would be to elevate us to a certain godlike status, small g. But of course, as a created being, we simply can't. We can't understand God because we're not. And nor do I want to be. So I simply accept that it is actually impossible for me to understand God. And I just choose to let that go. I cannot understand him. But to know him, that's different. That's entirely different. And again, I'll never fully know him, but what a life to know God with all of my created being. So, for example, I understand that he created us in his image. So just as a woman likes to be wooed and romanced and chased, well, so does God. He wants that relationship with us where we're wooing him and romancing him and chasing him. And just like a man likes to fight and do battle and see justice and sometimes be a little bit wild and crazy, and that's in his nature too. He wants to be a bit daring and win the battles for us and save the day, because those elements in our nature are created in his image, and so those are things that are part of his very self, his essence. So moving on, the other theme, or another theme that was throughout the class which challenged me, is the theme that God does everything that he does because of who he is. He didn't create mankind because he was lonely, which I had actually thought he did. He created the world and all within it because his very nature is creator. He gave of himself by allowing himself to become one with creation because he is giver, not a giver, the giver. He doesn't just act in love, but he actually is love. He doesn't offer forgiveness. His nature is forgiveness. He is righteousness. He is judge, etc. So prior to this class, I had thought of God as an example of all those things, or perhaps things to strive for, or parts of his perfect personality, but that need perfecting in us. Philippians 4:8 encourages whatever things are right, pure, noble, etc. Think on all those things. But God actually is those things. He isn't just an example of those things. So he isn't just showing us a part of his personality, that, he can be this for a moment, then he can, like we have personality and we flick from one thing to the next. But in fact, with each of those things, he's showing us a part of his very nature. Again, it's really hard. You can't wrap your head around it. I think you just need to accept that he is, and just want to get to know him better. The last thing that I want to highlight is something that's been really challenging my thinking, is the topic of atonement. So, having been raised in a Christian home with a father who's been blessed with the gift of teaching, the term atonement is a term I've heard many times. I've heard the concept of breaking it down to a simple meaning of at-one-ment, but never before have I considered that atonement is not some form of making amends with God, or with a God that we've managed to upset simply because we're a product of first father and first mother and we are sin. I was taught that atonement was a form of ransom, like liberating slaves, setting them free. We're born in sin. God's nature of justice requires payment is made. So we could never do that for himself. So he provides for us of himself and provides himself, God the Son, the Lamb of God, to be paying the price with his death and subsequent resurrection. He paid the price and set us free and satisfied the requirement for justice. The concept that I'd never actually heard before this was explained in topic 8 that it's all kind of about face. Atonement isn't required by God, pardon me, but almost in reverse as a response from God. The sacrifices, offerings in the Old Testament were not to appease God, which I thought they were, but they were actually in response to his mercy, in a response to God, in a response to he is merciful, he is justice, therefore we're giving him this sacrifice in gratitude. So of deep impact to me was Grant's comment, what would this do if you understood that God does the work in reconciling and all you have to do is say thank you? So that thought, that's big. It brings peace and healing to me because I've always struggled with this desire to please God, to be good, to earn his love, all the while knowing in my head that that's not right. Brenda Colgan was referenced as saying, it's never God who needs to be reconciled to us, but us to him, as it is his unswerving love that is the driving force behind reconciliation. I understand this to mean that we don't need to seek to be reconciled to God as if somehow he can't bear to look at us for a time and we must placate him or find justice somehow. But in fact, he's always seeking for us to do an about-face and reconcile ourselves to him, searching for him, seeking to know him better, and in so doing, peace and justice are both served at the same time. So all that's brought actually a lot of comfort to me, knowing that I can put aside my striving as I seek to change my relationship with God just in order to know him better. This subject has just been the start of our Alpha Crucis journey, and I'm excited and a little bit nervous to sign up for the next subject. I feel that this has just been the tip of the iceberg, and like only a really small tip at that. I'm a little uncertain how to show a bibliography with a visual presentation, and I did read in the notes that you would have preferred, some slides or something so that you're not just looking at a screen and listening to somebody talk. I'm not yet skilled with that. I'm very new to the camera, so I will get better in time, but I understand if you need to mark me down for that, that's reasonable. I do hope to do better in time as I learn. The ability to upload the presentation is not actually available at the moment because that has passed the due date, and you granted us the extension. So my intention is to figure out how to load this to YouTube and pop it in an email to you. So I hope that that is acceptable. If it isn't, please let me know. And thank you for your time and thank you for listening. Cheers. Have a good day.